You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Hello, and thanks for joining Revolution 250, where we look at events that took place 250 years ago this week. This is from the American Revolution Podcast, just a short bonus episode to remind you about these important anniversaries from the Revolution. This week we remember General Washington's first mutiny of Continental soldiers on September 10th, 1775. The siege of Boston had begun back in April of 1775, and other than the Battle of Bunker Hill, there were only a few small skirmishes in the area. Generally, both sides sat behind their lines, just watching the other side. One of the biggest problems of having a standing army with little to do is that the soldiers get bored and then get into trouble. Some of the biggest troublemakers turned out to be the riflemen. Now, the Continental Congress had authorized riflemen from Virginia and Pennsylvania to join the Continental Army, which up until that time had consisted of just New Englanders. By fall, the Army had over 1,400 riflemen. The great benefit of rifles, as I've mentioned before, is that they can hit a man at about 200 yards. Some could do even better. While a standard issue musket only has a range of about 50 yards at best. Most soldiers still used muskets because rifles took too long to load and quickly became fouled after multiple shots left a crusty buildup inside the barrel. Despite these battlefield limitations, riflemen proved highly valuable for picking off sentries across the harbor and could be used to take out officers during a battle. The riflemen were also the first soldiers to join the army from outside New England, meaning the grateful New Englanders wanted to show how happy they were to have them. The Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Maryland riflemen were serving under officers like Daniel Morgan, William Thompson, and Michael Cressup, who all kind of became heroes around camp, impressing soldiers with their marksmanship. The soldiers stood apart from the rest of the army with their frontier-style hunting shirts. They received preferential treatment with their own separate encampments and an exemption from fatigue duty. Of course, the special treatment went to their heads, and riflemen began to think that they could get away with anything. They spent most of their days and nights sitting around drinking and telling each other about their exploits from their lives on the frontier. They also developed an attitude that they did not need to take orders from anyone. On September 10th, one of the officers in Thompson's rifle brigade had a sergeant arrested for neglect of duty and threw him in the stockhouse. Several of his buddies discussed breaking him out, as they had done for other comrades a couple of times before. After the officer heard about these discussions, he ordered the arrest of the ringleader. A few hours later, the men broke out of the shack where they were being held and went back to their company. At this point, Colonel Thompson and his officers recaptured the prisoners and ordered them taken to the main guardhouse in Cambridge. About 20 minutes later, 32 riflemen took up their weapons and started marching to Cambridge with the intent of once again freeing their comrades. Colonel Thompson sent an express rider to General Washington, explaining to him what was about to happen. Now, Washington, who was all about military discipline, was not going to allow soldiers to engage in a jailbreak without consequences. Upon receiving the message, he quickly assembled 500 soldiers with loaded muskets and fixed bayonets. They surrounded the guardhouse where the prisoners were being held. Washington then rode out personally to intercept the riflemen who were still marching toward headquarters. Seeing the large guard assembled, the riflemen decided that this was not such a good idea after all. They took cover behind some trees. Washington rode out and ordered them to ground their rifles. He had 6 of the ringleaders arrested and marched the rest back to camp for local punishment. Now, in the regular army, a mutiny like this would result in some executions. But Continental officers realized that lax discipline up until this time was probably partially responsible. These men would likely become good soldiers under proper discipline. The following day, a court-martial sentenced all the mutineers to a mere fine of 20 shillings each. One mutineer served an additional 6 days in jail, but no one even got flogged. The incident seemed to bring the riflemen into line. Washington also saw to it that the riflemen started to work fatigue duty to help keep them busy. I hope you've enjoyed this Revolution 250 moment. For more details on this story, check out episode 73 of the American Revolution podcast. I also encourage you to subscribe for free on whatever podcast platform you like. Again, thanks for listening to this Revolution 250 moment on the American Revolution podcast.